So we've got one more item on the agenda, and it's going to be a great interview with someone who's already been on stage. Welcome back, Tina O. Had we known about the heavy metal stuff, that song would have been different. Thanks for coming on our show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the other two finalists. What kind of got you interested in moving in the environmental movement?
Cool. I'm going to add on to that, to environmental justice, because there's a big difference there. I was involved in the student movement with my students' union. I was a vice president. I attend university on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq land in New Brunswick. It's called Mount Allison University. And I got to learn about kind of the accessible forms of, education. We're there to attend school. We pay $8,000, one of the most expensive universities in Canada. And on top of that, how inaccessible university has become. So there's a lot of social justice to be had there, because education, is a form of liberation. But why is it only accessible to the most rich, most privileged people? So I got involved through that, and as I'll connect it later on, I got involved with the divestment movement, which is kind of shaking a lot of, the core of academic institutions around Canada, all over North America, all over the world. And talking kind of about that move of, like Josh was saying, challenging that ivory tower. So divestment is a form, or I guess it's a tactic, where we are asking institutions to divest their investments from the fossil fuel industry, and instead invest that into something cleaner, but not just clean, but something moral and just. So that's how I got involved.
That's great. Yeah, and I'm glad that you explained, what divestment is, and because that's a movement that's growing all amongst our finalists. And for anyone who's been following our top 25 list, you'll know that the divestment movement is huge within the youth sector in terms of environmental matters and environmental justice. What convinced you to get involved in environmental justice and in the divestment movement at Mount
I guess from an early age, my father was actually, we're Korean in background, so my father was in university. He was the university student union president when back in the 80s, where there was a lot of political unrest. And he was actually imprisoned for several years for political activism. And so, from a young age, that was always really ingrained in me to kind of resist those really oppressive forces. And those are kind of the mirrors of what we see. I think a lot of what we see today is, we're so removed from, a lot of terrible things that are happening in the world, that maybe we kind of, let it, brush off our shoulder or something. So I think in terms of university, it was, if it's wrong to wreck the planet, then it's even worse to profit off of that wreckage, which is what the universities in Canada have been doing. There are several universities in the United States that have divested and have divested successfly, to the point where one of the university officials at my university had stated that if they had divested pre-2014, they would have actually had way more money because of the oil drop in price. And of course, it's also wrong to kind of talk about the financial aspect of it, because, and wreckage of the planet is just morally wrong. We're an institution that teaches young people about climate science. I just saw a mouse with it. Sorry. So as an institution that teaches young people about climate science, it seems almost extremely hypocritical that we are investing in industries that are ruining our chances of a habitable world. Young people, I think it's fair for me to say that every young person in this room, but also, even the world, have environmental values, because we are the generation that will be shouldering all of that wreckage. So, it's kind of hard not to be pessimistic about it, but then, taking that action into our own hands is, the thing to do.
Yeah, totally. And on that, there's definitely a lot of weight that we can hold with this for sure. So I think it's important to do what you just said. It's figure out how we can start moving the gears and turning the wheels and trying to make it work. So for folks who are thinking about universities or at a university now, what's your advice to them?
I think in terms of, the opportunity to be in university is one of the most privileged aspects, I think, of being a student. But also, utilizing that privilege into something where, that becomes, I wouldn't say productive, because I don't think we should, equate productivity to, what we do, or productivity to the environment, but utilizing our privilege into changing or stirring up whatever wrongs we're seeing within the university realm, right? What we see also with universities is a slide into a very neoliberal, right-centered or right type of scale where university administration positions are growing, yet tenure faculty is dropping. Or tuition is rising up, but then a lot of our services are sliding down. So obviously there's something missing, and there's a problem there. Universities are becoming profitable, but they're nonprofit. They're a public institution. Every person has a right to an education. Every person has a right to an affordable education, and that's something that I think people within that space that have the privilege to be in that space need to be changing.
That's great. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight as well is I know you're a community gardener as well, and you run a really, really great program, and I wanted to give you some space to talk about that. Yeah.
Really lucky this year to be the community garden coordinator in Sackville. We're a town of 5,000 people, so very, very small. And you see a lot of community gardens in cities where people don't have, the physical space to garden or to farm or to grow their own food. Yet in Sackville, what we have is it's a marshland. So you could imagine how difficult it would be to grow things on a marsh. But there's also, this very, very long history of indigenous knowledge into kind of trapping away the water from flowing into the marsh. It's called an abattoir. And to grow, whatever it is. And the most important part of that is also sustenance farming. So we're an organic community garden, but talking about garden, it kind of makes me a little nervous because it's so much more than that. It's not just a hobby. It's teaching people and giving them the right tools as to how to grow their own food, but also making sure that that's also a really accessible form of growing food. So our plots are huge. They're not city plots where it's like on a rooftop. It's soil that's been there for however many years. We're located right on the train tracks, and again, we are in a marsh, so we do flood, but then kind of knowing that, taking those floods as, that's just life. That's what it means to be growing food in that area. People have done it for thousands of years before us, and we can too. And making sure that, we're giving them, or giving people the tools is to learn how to, grow food, which is one of the most, I think, basic forms of environmentalism, or one of the most accessible forms of environmentalism. So it's all connected.
Yeah, that's great. And what I love about that too is, we started this conversation talking about accessible and affordable education. And there's an ivory tower that, exists, and there might not be something that you can do quite about that right now, and you're working hard, and that's really great. But you're also doing this thing as well that tackles that exact thing, just on a different scale, on a different level. You're teaching people how to garden and giving them an education in something different, and so applauding you for that. I think it's just great. I think it's really amazing that you see this issue here, you're working on that, and you're also going to find a way to take it and really bring it back to the community level again. So I think that's just great. My last question for you is about what you think these top 25 finalists should know moving forward in the environmental justice movement.
I think it's also important to think that, you know, I think that conservation era is over. What we need to be doing is like taking action, resisting, stirring shit up. Sorry, I forgot there were kids. But I mean, I think that's so important. We are, you know, the generation to be shouldering a lot of that climate wreckage. And I think climate change has, you know, been talked about as this slow violence, right? Something that we don't see right away. And I think that's wrong. We're seeing that. We're seeing that in wildfires in Alberta. We're seeing that in flooding in Ottawa. And, you know, Canada is very fortunate to be located somewhere where we're not getting wildfires like we saw in Portugal. But the time is now, and we need to be acting now. And we can't kind of take it or overlook it. And, you know, a lot of people won't agree with what we're doing, but it's also, there's no time left. So, yeah.
Great, wonderful. Everyone, Tina O. Thank you so much.